course. Are you sure you want me to speak, or can we just keep vibing to the concert? They're killing it, all right? And I'll tell you what this crowd really needs is a Dr. Overby cover album, all right? Because I didn't know he had that in him. He is singing incredibly. Yes, give him a round of applause, please. You have to understand, this is my first ceremony like this. My first time in Wisconsin, actually, period. So, what a welcome, right? What a welcome. What a welcome. I'm genuinely honored to be here today, and I want to start by thanking Dr. Jonathan Overby and Amy Overby for tirelessly organizing what is the oldest official state celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States. Give them a round of applause. This is incredible. It's fantastic. And thank you to Governor Tony Evers, First Lady Kathy Evers, the other dignitaries I'm grateful enough to share the stage with, and thank you all for being here. It's really important, especially, this particular year. Today we celebrate Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and this one is special. This celebration is taking place in a year that marks 250 years since America's founding with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It was a document that laid out ideals that Dr. King would give his life fighting for future generations to realize. The self-evident truths that all people are created equal and are endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A promise we're all still fighting to fulfill. Clearly. This is the day where, we're speaking too much truth already, there's a protester. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if it's a protester. This is the day where we honor the life and reflect on the legacy of the icon that is Dr. King. It's also a day when we watch certain federal officials share quotes from Dr. King's speeches that directly contradict their ideology and oppressive actions. I won't name names, I promise. We'll keep it civil today, mostly civil. But I start there because Dr. King's activism is often sanitized. While he lived by the creed of love your enemy, he was no less of a fighter. He was a peaceful warrior for justice. He spoke inconvenient, controversial truths. He spoke out against unjust wars. He, along with his generation of activists, forced America to reckon with its unjust contradictions by citing its own founding principles. This was a man of such immense courage that despite repeated incarceration and violence, he kept going. He was undeterred. This was a man who was stabbed in the chest at a 1958 book signing and remained unfazed and calm. When he got to the hospital, the doctors said that if he had even sneezed, he would have died. Even when a sneeze away from death, Dr. King remained committed to the fight. He bore a cross-shaped scar on his chest for the rest of his life, a symbol of his faith and commitment to the fight for freedom. This was a man who knew he was being actively spied on by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, and yet he persisted. He bravely stared into the face of Jim Crow and white supremacy and said, "Enough is enough." But Dr. King was more than an orator. He was an organizer. He was more than a dreamer. He was a strategist. He was more than a believer in America's promised ideals. He challenged America to live up to them. He had such a deep faith and resilient spirituality that guided his leadership and elevated everyone around him. But today's not about platitudes, right? This is a day where we get the opportunity to draw insights from Dr. King that we can apply in our ongoing fight to fulfill the vision of Dr. King's promised land. The theme of today's event is the power of unity. What a profound, aspirational theme at a time when we need it most. I often wonder what Dr. King would say about the moment we find ourselves in, a moment where we have access to unlimited information but live in an age of disinformation, a time where we can connect with anyone on the planet with the tap of a screen but feel so disconnected, a moment where algorithms incentivize and monetize our divisions, a moment where we're the most economically prosperous nation on earth and yet so many languish in poverty, A moment where we're achieving scientific and technological breakthroughs, but we're taking steps back politically and culturally that would have felt unimaginable just a decade ago. And although we've certainly been more divided than this, I mean, we did, we had a civil war at one point, so we have been a little bit more divided than this. It feels at times as if we have never been more polarized. I'm not sure exactly what Dr. King would say about the times we find ourselves in, but what I do know is that he would tell us not to give up on our ability to change them. He would tell us not to give up on ourselves. He would tell us not to give up on each other, and he would tell us not to give up on this country, no matter how hard it is. And I know it's getting a little harder. But he wouldn't whitewash this moment either. He would tell the blunt truth, as he did in his time. He would praise the progress we've made, but remain clear-eyed about the renewed setbacks we face and the work we still have left to do. Now, I'm too young to have witnessed Dr. King's leadership firsthand. I was born 25 years after he died, but his impact never died. And I gravitated towards reading about him as a kid. As I became a teenager, something happened that changed my life and the life of the country's. Just as Emmett Till's murder galvanized the movement during King's time, so did Trayvon Martin's during ours. It was Trayvon's death and the callousness of the media coverage that pushed me into journalism. I was around his age when it happened. I kind of looked like him. I mean, I had hair at the time, so there was a little bit more of a resemblance. I assure you, I did look a little bit more like him. I wore hoodies like him. I walked through my neighborhood like him. I felt it could have easily have been me. Sometime after, I picked up Dr. King's autobiography, and I read it at a time when Barack Obama was president of the United States, and anything seemed possible. That period crafted my worldview. A black kid could grow up and be anything. It led me down the path of leaving my job in tech, start a media company, and I've been doing pro-democracy journalism for 10 years now, and throughout all this craziness, I've never seemed to lose my sanity or my faith in people. But that's because Dr. King shaped my optimism. But I'm not going to lie to you. In recent weeks, in recent years, my faith and hope in humanity has been tested, as I'm sure all of us has. But in preparation for this speech, as I started reading about Dr. King's life again and his style of leadership, I picked up Jonathan Ives' excellent biography in King, and I read as many pieces of King's writing and listened to every speech I could, and it helped me look at the long arc of history, and it revitalized me at a time when I needed it most. Because if Dr. King could keep his faith in his time, why can't we in ours? Surely we can, right? It became clear to me that Dr. King's worldview and his style of moral leadership is what this country so desperately needs right now. Moral leadership. Dr. King's combination of forceful truth-telling, relentless organizing, and message of nonviolent love is the antidote to this insanity. As a journalist, I'm also a student of history. And so with so many attacks on historic truth and a renewed debate about what country we are or who's even an American, I think it's more important than ever to reassert some of Dr. King's truth here today and glean lessons from his leadership. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life sits at a definitive juncture of America's destiny. It was almost as if he was molded by a power beyond us, both fitted to the time he lived and equipped with a vision of a world he would never live to see. He was the leader we needed. Human history has been defined by a great struggle between two types of leaders. There's the divider and the uniter. The divider seeks to rip us apart by appealing to our darker impulses. They weaponize hatred and tell us to be fearful of one another. These so-called leaders, they scapegoat and they target the vulnerable among us. They're demagogues who give people permission to be their worst selves. And then there's the uniter, who tries to bring us together by, as Abraham Lincoln said, appealing to our better angels. The uniters remind us that there's more that binds us than divides us. They push us toward our personal and collective greatness. They organize us behind a shared moral purpose. They help to ensure the moral universe's bend toward justice. Dr. King was one of those leaders. He believed in us. He believed in humanity's capacity for good. He believed in what he called the great decent majority. He believed that we could be shown a better way. He believed in a country that didn't believe he deserved equal rights. His optimistic message of nonviolent love in the face of hatred was a force of nature so fundamental to the human spirit that it moved the hearts and minds of millions. King believed that anyone could buy into the idea and the promise of America and be as American as anyone else. He believed in this multicultural experiment. He bought into this idea just as my immigrant parents from Sierra Leone bought into it. Anyone can come here. It's not about blood and soil or how long you've been here. It's an idea that any immigrant can come and fulfill. That anyone can make something of themselves. The idea that we're all worthy of dignity. The idea that the Constitution should protect the rights of all people, not the privileged few. Dr. King was a modern-day founding father. Dr. King and his generation of freedom fighters took the language of the Declaration and Constitution and used it to make the case for black liberation. Like Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln before him, Dr. King pointed out the contradictions in American society and used the founding principles to bolster his arguments for the urgent necessity of freedom. Dr. King studied Gandhi's tactics of nonviolent resistance. He read Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience. He learned about the true power of unity and later put it into practice. But he didn't treat unity as a slogan, as Melody just said earlier. He utilized it as a collective force for change. Dr. King knew that there was far more that united us than divided us, that the connective tissue of the American idea could bind us together, that the American people are like this choir, that when our voices come together, they create powerful harmonies that can reverberate through the halls of Capitol buildings. When Americans unite behind a common purpose, they have a unique capacity to change the hearts, minds, and legislation of this country. In a time long before social media and the attention economy, Dr. King knew how to command the nation's attention and channel it as a tool for progress. And he did that repeatedly. In Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, at the age of just 26, people forget, this was a young man. We see him as we see him as this icon, this statue, but he was 26 years old. And he was thrust into the center of the fight against racial segregation. After 15-year-old Claudette Colvin refused to give up her seat, Rosa Parks at the NAACP would do the same. And I just want to say quickly, Claudette Colvin passed away just last week. So I just would like to say rest in power to her. She helped set off a movement, and she lived until 86 to see at least some of Dr. King's promised land fulfilled. Dr. King was then recruited by Joanne Robinson, E.D. Nixon, and Ralph Abernathy to lead the Montgomery bus boycott. As a pastor, Dr. King already knew how to move his congregation, and now he would move this nation. Because you see, black people, they made up 3/4 of the bus riders in Montgomery. They knew if they withheld their rides that they could grind the entire bus economy to a halt there. And they made a massive impact, but also a massive backlash. Dr. King's house was firebombed during the boycott. His wife, the great Coretta Scott King, was home at the time with their firstborn daughter, and thankfully they were unharmed. But they both kept going, in spite of that. The boycott lasted 381 days, and the NAACP filed a lawsuit that led to the Supreme Court ending bus segregation. And while the boycott created social and economic pressure, the NAACP's case provided the legal means for change. The Montgomery bus boycott made Dr. King world famous, but most importantly, it proved that segregation could be successfully challenged by organized mass nonviolent action. The bus boycott inspired a grassroots movement that took life of its own. Young people engaged in sit-ins across the country. Then came the Freedom Rides. We had Ella Baker, James Lawson, Dr. King. They guided student leaders like John Lewis, James Bevel, Diane Nash, Marion Barry, C.T. Vivian, and Bernard Lafayette Jr. into creating SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, because Dr. King knew the power of unity and organizing. Then, in 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy joined forces with Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, and they united the black community there against segregation. They used the economic tools of protests and boycotts to force action once again. But their peaceful protests faced violent pushback. And Dr. King was arrested once again, but this time he did something powerful. He wrote in the margins of newspapers and sandwich wrappers, and he gave them to others who snuck them out the jail. His colleagues kind of pieced these little writings and these pieces of paper together in what became the letter from Birmingham jail. A piece of writing that I consider to be up there with America's best founding documents, frankly. And it was in this document that Dr. King wrote one of his most important lines, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. King also wrote, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." Dr. King's letter was a definitive philosophical and moral defense of the civil rights movement strategy of nonviolent civil disobedience. Dr. King was released, and he and his allies would garner meaningful victories in Birmingham, leading to the desegregation of local businesses. And with momentum at his back, he didn't stop there. Even though JFK was like, "We're close to the bill, maybe don't do the march," he said, "No, we're doing the March on Washington anyway," and that's where he delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech to a crowd of 250,000 people of all races. He united his people behind a message of hope. Later on, LBJ, President Lyndon Johnson, signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and federally ended segregation and banned discrimination in employment. It was a victory, but Dr. King didn't stop there. He kept pushing. In Selma, Alabama, Dr. King once again showed the nation what moral leadership looks like. The right to vote was being systemically denied to Black Americans, and Dr. King knew that democracy itself was hollow if millions were locked out of it. When peaceful marchers led by organizers like John Lewis and Amelia Boynton Robinson crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, met with brutal violence, batons, tear gas, horses, it was broadcast across the nation. And I went to Selma and I met Charles Malden and Joanne Bland, who was 11 at the time, and they relayed the stories, and it was brutal. But instead of retreating, King and the movement responded with discipline and courage and unity. Americans from across the country flooded to Selma. Selma shocked the conscience of the nation and forced action. And within months, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law, expanding democracy and proving once again that when the people unite behind demands for justice, even the most entrenched systems can be changed. And that is why Dr. King's time has widely been considered by historians to be another founding era, an era where the audacious patriotism of the Black community forced America forward. It's always been this community and those who ally with us that have pushed America to live up to its promise. And it's for this reason that I consider America to have had three foundings, not just one. There was the first founding with the Declaration. Then there was Reconstruction at the end of the Civil War, after slavery, when America momentarily sought to grant freedom to all. During Reconstruction, Black people began purchasing land in the largest quantities they ever had. They were creating communities. They started voting, electing more than 2,000 Black officials, including 10 members of Congress and 2 U.S. senators, 10 members of the House, frankly. That short-lived period of racial progress resulted in profound backlash, as pushes for progress often do. The lost cause of the Confederacy lived on, and Southern states began implementing Jim Crow laws, oppressing Black people. The sharecropping system entrapped former slaves. Political freedom of Black people was suppressed. Violence erupted. More than 4,000 Black people were lynched between 1877 and 1950. But then, Dr. King and his fellow founding fathers and mothers of the 1950s and 60s push us to fulfill America's promise once again. But there was backlash resulting in the assassination of Dr. King. But as a result of their work, America made slow progress over decades in fits and starts. There was the war on drugs, there was hindrances, but overall, it was a period that led and culminated in the first Black president of the United States, Barack Obama, being elected. But then came the backlash. We're still currently living within that backlash. And after the 2020 murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Elijah McClain, there was a moment, a massive protest and a national re-education on systemic racism. Then the backlash intensified. And in 2024, there was more backlash. Use that word to summarize it. Now there's an ongoing attack on what actually makes America great, which is our multicultural and multiracial democracy. We've seen rollbacks to fundamental civil rights protections under the guise of attacking DEI. We've seen power grabs and masked men in unmarked cars on America's street, racially profiling and harassing both immigrants and U.S. citizens alike. We've seen Americans like Renee Nicole Good killed by a federal agent. We've seen an attempt to roll back the progress of our multicultural democracy in an echo of the reverse gains we saw after Reconstruction. We've seen attempts to erase and distort history in an effort to delegitimize the stories that prove how ordinary people have challenged and changed unjust systems. This is what authoritarianism looks like. But the American people have faced down authoritarianism before and won, because oppression is a mask for weakness. None of this is strength, it's weakness. And I'm not just talking about our fight against Nazi Germany, in which black people fought for freedom abroad and then returned to a country that wouldn't guarantee their own. No, we've had authoritarianism here in America before. The institution of slavery was authoritarian. The Jim Crow South was authoritarian. And do you know what we did? We organized, unified, and defeated it. Throughout history, we have repeatedly refounded and redefined this country, time and time again. And now we're approaching a new founding era, a moment where we are once again debating the fundamental question of what kind of country we want to be. And that's the beauty of America, that despite who we were yesterday or even who we are today, we as a people have the power to decide who we will be tomorrow. And as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But as history and King's own actions make clear, the arc does not bend on its own. It bends when a united people are brave enough to push it. We have so many more tools at our disposal. Now anyone can look at their phones and spread truth to millions. They can press record and speak and record atrocities. They can blast information at the speed of lightning. We have our own circles of influence. We can mass organize. Now we are all leaders, each of us individually, whether we like it or not. We each, everyone's got at least 10 Instagram followers, right? Like, you're leading them. You're leading the people in your tribe, your family, your community. Each of us has that responsibility and power now. And now we must live by King's example and not be afraid. If the civil rights heroes could do it in their era with far fewer legal protections, then surely we can do it in ours, right? Surely we can do it in ours. If an 11-year-old Joanne Bland and a 25-year-old John Lewis could cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday, get back up, and keep fighting, then so can we. So can we. If students could sit at segregated lunch counters, if ordinary people could face dogs and fire hoses, if everyday people could risk everything in their fight for dignity, then so can we. If Barack Obama could rise to the highest office of the land and never break and never crack under the pressure and the racism he faced, then so can we. Why not? Why not us? And if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. could climb to the mountaintop, envision a promised land, and unite the people of his time to push America forward, then so can we. And we will. We will. Because it's our turn. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.